on BBC Sounds.
The government has unveiled plans for market stalls, shops and supermarkets to be legally able to sell goods using only Britain's traditional imperial weights and measures. Imagine, although legislation means it's currently legal to price goods in pounds and ounces, these have to be displayed alongside the price in grams and kilos. Now it looks like the opportunity to exclusively use imperial is back. So that's right, once more, your greengrocer will be able to sell you a pound of apples with no talk of grams. Won't have to tell you it's 0.453592 kilos. And you'll be able to buy a pint of milk without the label also reading that it's 0.568281 litres. And your pint of beer will now be able to bear the Crown stamp on the glass. Apparently that's a big thing too. The Brexit Minister Lord Frost says these plans capitalise on our freedom from EU rules and are a great way to start delivering the opportunities of Brexit. Is this making you think, yes, we have something from Brexit? This is a great reason to have voted that way. You might remember the case of the so-called metric martyr. Back in 2001, Stephen Thoburn, a greengrocer from Sunderland, refused to use any metric measurements at all in a case which the presiding judge described as involving the most famous bunch of bananas in legal history. Mr. Thoburn was convicted after undercover officers bought bananas that were not measured in grams. It sounds crazy now. 2 decades later, the Prime Minister is to make good on a pledge to vindicate the metric martyr's cause. Maybe you're somebody who never really understood metric units and you're relieved to hear they're on the way out. Or perhaps you think this is ridiculous, simply a symbolic move from the government after Brexit. And many of us are, we've been talking about bilingual Betty, many of us are bilingual when it comes to measurements. And obviously scales, electric scales, one touch, they convert it. So what's the problem here? Email vine@bbc.co.uk with your thoughts and your phone number. Text us 88291. 2 great guests for you. Warwick Cairns is from the British Weights and Measures Association, which is dedicated to bringing back the pound, the foot, the inch and the mile. Peter Burke is from the UK Metric Association. Peter, I'll start with you. I'm guessing you just want things to stay as they are, do you?
Hello. Hi, Jeremy. I think it's a very, very good summary you've given there. I mean, to be honest with you, one aspect of this is it could well be a dead cat, in other words, the government trying to blind us to some other things that are going on behind the scenes. Because, quite frankly, it's a regressive measure. They will know that themselves. I mean, even if Jacob Rees-Mogg and Ian Duncan-Smith are deluded about the value of imperial measures, the Prime Minister knows perfectly well. People in school have been learning metric as the primary unit of measurement ever since the 1960s. So the people who don't understand metric are really significantly aging now. And,
that's a good point. I'll come back to your next point in a second. But Warwick, it's a good point that Peter makes, is that the people who like imperial tend to be older.
Well, it's the horses for courses, really. If you ask a teenager how tall they are, chances are you'll get the height in feet and inches.
Will you?
Pretty much so. The most recent surveys, when we did a couple of years back, we were asking people, how tall are you? And giving people a free choice without nudging them in either direction. And they tend to give it in feet and inches. I suppose the point what we would make, though, is that it's about freedom. So if people genuinely prefer metric, they should be allowed to continue to do so. We don't wish to force people to use pounds and ounces or feet and inches. But what we do stand for is the freedom for people to be allowed to use it if they want to. And if it's, things change. So, for example, sorry, stop me if I'm talking on.
That's
things like televisions. No one passed a law to say you've got to get rid of your old cathode ray television, big fat telly, and get a flat screen. People did it because it's better. If metric is generally better for everyday purposes, people will use it without being compelled to do so.
That's fine, except that the state does have a role here in deciding what is the official measure. And Peter Burke, maybe it's fine that we do have as the official measure metric, because I'm guessing you've got just a few standout things. People say they're height in feet and inches. We measure things in miles. Once you wipe those away, you're home clear.
I'm glad Warwick mentioned that. I'm a doctor, and we all measure people in kilograms and centimetres, and then we have to convert, which is actually an additional hassle, but not more to the point. It's a source of error. If you tried to calculate someone's BMI based on imperial, you couldn't do it. And we run in kilometres, and we drive in miles. Now, how much sense is there in that? If you want to say, we should keep on pounds, shillings, and pence. Very few people have nostalgia now for pounds, shillings, and pence. I'm old enough to remember them, but I wouldn't go back. And if somebody said, well, we should be free to sell in pounds, shillings, and pence and buy in pounds and pence, would that make sense? No, of course not. You've got to have some uniform. Since the Magna Carta, it has been a requirement that there is a uniform system of weights and measures in the country, and that is now metric and has been since 1965. The first time it was decided upon that this country should metricate was in the 1860s, and ever since then, it has been government policy that metric is best, and it's worldwide. It's not just the UK, not just UK and America.
Understood.
The only other,
and
sorry,
once we mix systems, Warwick, the problem you get is a situation that we had a couple of months ago with a man called Liam Thorpe, who it was in Liverpool, and he was offered the vaccine, and he was a bit surprised. He was offered it very, very early in the process. He's only in his 30s. He's got no underlying health conditions. And when he rang his doctors to ask why he'd been singled out as one of the most vulnerable people in Liverpool, he was told that he'd got a BMI of 28,000. Now, bear in mind, a BMI of 39 is classified as morbidly obese. And when they looked into it, they found that instead of writing down his height as 6'2", they'd written down his height as 6.2 centimetres. And his mother told him, this should be a warning to you.
People are going to make silly errors like that, whatever systems we use. I mean, these things happen. I'll just point out a couple of errors about we've been planning to go metric since the 1860s. That's not the case. I mean, there were, as you rightly say, there were measures mentioned back then, but it hasn't always been government policy. I mean, for example, in order to get into the European Union, the UK committed to going metric, but in 1979, the bodies set up to enforce metric were abolished. So the Metrication Board and so on was abolished under Margaret Thatcher. So different governments have different policies. We haven't all been on that direction towards metric for 100 odd years. So one system, let me say about one system, for more than 100 years, from the late 1800s until 2000, it was perfectly legal in the UK to use whichever system you please, as long as your measures were accurate. So you were free to use metric in shops if you wanted to. You were free to use pounds and ounces in the shops. And what we used was driven by what people wanted. And all we're saying is let people use what they want.
All right. Well, the argument against that is that it's a recipe for chaos, but we'll see what the listeners think. Thank you so much for your time on a Friday. Warwick Cairns from the British Weights and Measures Association. Peter Burke from the UK Metric Association. Here are the Who in Imperial. Sure, they're Imperial.